Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast, where we celebrate individuals and families, businesses, and organizations that seek out and promote the exploration, stewardship, conservation, access, and enjoyment of the outdoors. Drew YoungeDyke is our guest today on the Outdoor Adventure Series. Drew is an outdoor enthusiast, conservationist, and National Communications Director for Trout Unlimited. Drew, it's a pleasure to finally have you on the Outdoor Adventure Series podcast. Welcome.
Thank you, Howard. It's a pleasure to be on. Thank you.
Fantastic. And I think we have to do right at the onset is, since you and I are both from Michigan, got to put your hand up and you got to say, where do you live? So here's where I'm at.
So I'm not quite sure on the camera if it will be facing the right direction, but I live down here in Ann Arbor currently.
Okay.
I grew up here in Central Lake, and let's see, if you do the other way, we got a cabin over here in the Western Upper Peninsula where I like to spend as much time as possible.
That's fantastic. And I really am envious about the amount of time when you do get to spend it up there, because it's Upper Peninsula is just gorgeous. And I would love just to kind of get back up there and explore. So this is, we talk a little bit about that too. So for our listeners, I met Drew through our membership at the Outdoor Writers Association of America. This is the premier outdoor association, writers association for folks who are just experts in whether it's in journalism, freelance writing, and anything about the outdoors. And I get the podcast and enjoy a lot of great stories from folks like Drew. So let's get into this. So Drew, first off, tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, I love the Outdoor Writers Association of America, by the way. It's a good group of people. What I really like about it too is it represents a very diverse view of what the outdoors and outdoor recreation is. So I like that it has room for everybody, no matter what you like to do outside. But you know, that's really where I come from. I grew up doing all sorts of different things outside. When I was old enough, I learned to hunt. My grandpa took me fishing, although I didn't really get into fishing heavily until college. My aunts took me camping. They'd take me camping on Torch Lake or up to the shores of Lake Superior, me and my cousins. And that would just be camping and hiking and learning how to build a campfire. And that cottage up in the Western Upper Peninsula, that we used to go up there for a week every summer. And that was pretty amazing because we learned to fish, even though I wasn't much of a fisherman until later, but we just run around the woods. And we had horses growing up, so we'd ride horses on trail runs and just play in the woods. And I think a lot of that has to do with where my career ended up.
Very good. I love when I hear the story from my guest about how they were introduced to the outdoor space. And while oftentimes I hear the grandfather, the father, or the uncle took me hunting, fishing, canoeing, hiking, etc. But I have not heard too many where I take that back. There was one where the grandmother was very instrumental in my guest's life, but hearing you share about your aunts and taking you camping, you and your cousin, that had to have been a phenomenal experience, just to get out there in the wilds and just commune with nature with nobody else around.
It really was, because it was at that kind of time in your life when you're very influenced by experiences. I think I was probably 11, 12, 13 years old. I had an older cousin who was a couple years older, younger cousin, a couple years younger. My brother's 4 years younger. So we're all within about a 6-year age range. And my aunts, it was before they had their own families and their own kids. So they took us nieces and nephews camping, and it was something they did separately. They'd they camped, they canoed, they fished, and so they were introducing us to that. My dad didn't fish, but he taught me how to hunt. he didn't really have the patience for sitting in a boat and waiting for a bobber to go down. He was a football coach. There's a whole thing about that.
Yeah.
But my aunts would take us and introduce us to that experience, and it's something that's still very memorable, and I appreciate that. In my family, going back even through old family pictures, going back to the 20s, I've got pictures of my great grandpas holding up fish, but I also have pictures of my great grandmas holding up fish too. So it was always a family thing.
That's very cool. Out here in Nevada, and it's somewhere in, I don't know if it was Death Valley, Mojave, there is a very famous photographer, and I cannot remember her name right off the top of my head, but she and another woman would go out and they would just take photos. And today, those photos are just, they're treasures. I mean, what they were able to capture in those moments. And the reason I'm bringing this up, Drew, is I find it fascinating is that we think about our from the male side of the house, the grandfather, the father, the brothers, uncles, etc., introducing the kids to the outdoor space. And here, your aunts had to have been the wild ants, I think, if they hadn't had kids yet. So they're like, okay, guys, we're going to take you out and we're going to introduce you to the good stuff, good experiences.
They're definitely hippies. Yeah,
I can imagine that.
I get that. I get that on both sides of my family. I had some aunts that were kind of hippies, and my dad grew up on a farm, and he was a football coach. And yeah, I get a little country, a little hippie on both sides of my family.
All right, fair enough. Yeah, but I just love the fact that, and it's not shared enough, that women had just as much impact in the outdoor space as the guys did. And I love it. You mentioned your dad being on a farm. How much, when you grew up in northwest Michigan, somewhere up there, were you on a farm? Was this a small town? What was it like?
Yeah, it was a real small town. We grew up in town originally. The farm wasn't in my family anymore by the time I was born, but my dad had grown up on that, and he always wanted me to have those experiences. So for instance, my first jobs were milking cows, baling hay, driving tractor, and I think it had the intended effect. He wanted me to have those jobs as my first experiences, to make sure that I studied hard and wanted to go to college. So I had friends who were caddies on golf courses and that kind of thing, and no such luck for me. I was doing the grunt work on farms, and it was enough for me to know that I didn't want to do that for the rest of my life. So I went to college.
All right, good decision there. Good decision there. And it's not for everybody. Where did you go to college?
I went to Michigan State University, both for undergraduate as well as law school after that.
You went to law school. I didn't know that about you.
Yeah. I went to law school and passed the bar, all that kind of stuff. I never really practiced as a lawyer. Actually, my first job out of law school was working for the Michigan League of Conservation Voters and analyzing Michigan Supreme Court environmental decisions.
Okay.
And that I kind of took the job thinking might lead into a job with an environmental law firm. But as part of that job, I was doing the communications advocacy for the environmental organization. And I found that path appealed to me much more. So I really took my career, that was kind of the forker in the road, where I kind of decided I didn't need to be a lawyer and I wanted to go do communications, conservation advocacy.